So welcome everyone. We have a fascinating presentation right now on the topic of digital identity, which is so important today, especially for the digital economy. And when I say over 1 billion people today across the globe lack access to one of the most important human rights, the ability to prove who they are. Without identification, these people cannot access basic services like healthcare, education, banking, or voting. Without identification, people are effectively invisible to the world, and they are at risk of falling through the cracks in society and into poverty, exploitation, and suffering. Until recently, a future where everyone on the planet had access to a personal identity was an unattainable goal. But now, with more awareness, better technology, and international will, there is more hope. As a global community, we need to act quickly, though, because people need to prove the need for people to prove who they are is becoming even more critical in the face of conflicts, wars, mass migrations, climate change, and resource scarcity. They're issues that are forcing people to put themselves in very unsafe situations, leaving them more vulnerable than ever. And we are so happy to have you all here to join us for a viewing of a trailer of the Shadows in the Dark documentary and a Q&A with its producer, Mariana Dahan. She is a human rights activist and writer on the use of technology for human advancement and the effort to provide vulnerable people and populations with proof of identity.
What if you somehow lost your identification? Purse or wallet gone. No driver's license, credit cards, passport, no birth certificate. All wiped out in a disaster. The lifelines we depend on can disappear.
Please help us to be safe.
You can lose access to your money. Without identification, you can't get food, or housing, or work. You could find yourself among the 1 billion people in the world unable to prove who they are. Invisible, unrecognized, and unwanted. They can disappear into the shadows, falling through the cracks of society, into poverty, exploitation, and oblivion. Mariana Dahan traveled the world to better understand this growing identity crisis. A journey in search of solutions. Building walls. Experimenting with new technology. Mobilizing international support. What are the answers? Issues of identity, she finds, are not limited to refugees or stateless people. They can touch any of us.
I want to welcome Mariana Dahan. Please come. Founder of World Identity Network. Welcome, Mariana. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I know your time here in Davos is very precious. So I really appreciate 7 minutes might seem like not a long time, but actually it is, especially because we talk about topics like that, which are not an easy conversation to have. Yet I'm very excited to discuss this with you. And some of you might know me, might have seen me around GBBC. I was among the first ambassadors at the creation of these great organizations, working on digital identity issues with Sandra, with the team. Previously, I was at the World Bank. I have launched the Identification for Development, ID for the Agenda. It's crazy to think it's been 10 years ago. So time flies. But after that, I've created a nonprofit dedicated to these issues. And in 2024, I thought it would be good for us to look back and see what have we achieved, given that digital identity is one of the targets of the Sustainable Development Goals, target 16.9. SDGs have failed many of the promises, but in terms of digital identity, we might not be in such a bad position. Indeed, when I started ID4D, there were 2.5 billion people without any proof of identification. And in 10 years, the world managed to halve that. So,
Wow.
yeah, today is nearly a billion, just over a billion people. However, I thought it would be interesting to see how did we achieve that? Because it's important to have a goal and to achieve it, yet the means to achieve it is also really important. So yeah, that's why I'm here, and I'm happy to have this conversation with you.
We are so honored to have you here, and I want to encourage everyone in the audience to go online to shadowsinthedark.movie, where you can watch the documentary yourself and obviously follow the work of Mariana, who's doing amazing things. So, Mariana, you worked in this space for over a decade. What inspired you and World Identity Network to pursue this documentary and launch Shadows in the Dark?
It's a great question. So, many of us here have experience working with international development organizations. And when I was working there, launching ID4D program, I noticed that in order to convey a message, we had to write some very lengthy reports, PDF documents that eventually no one read, really. It was very hard to inspire people with 20 pages, 30 pages report. So I thought, there must be a way to convey such an important message in a much more comprehensive way. And storytelling is a tool that many of us have to still learn how to use and use more often. So I looked into filmmaking, and I thought that would be a really interesting way of communicating around these issues, especially if we want to take this conversation out of confined circles at Davos or United Nations or the World Bank. And curiously, I found that in the storytelling field, there is a bias as well. We often hear stories that are told from a one-sided perspective, specifically stories about refugees or migrants. It is very rare to actually hear people speak themselves. It is often experts, people who work in the humanitarian field, who know a lot of things about what's happening on the ground, but it is not them telling the story. So I decided that this documentary movie is gonna go there in the refugee camps and talk to these people and ask, well, first of all, do they need an ID? Do they want a proof of their existence, Do they want their biometrics to be taken? Do they worry how data is going to be used? By whom? Are they ready to trade biometric data for food? Is as basic as that. And you'd be surprised that some people who are really hungry in these refugee camps sometimes say no. I'll go out and find food myself, but I will not jeopardize my future. I will not put myself at the risk of falling prey to, let's say, Assad regime. That's what a Syrian refugee told us. Other people were on purpose burning their fingers, so that UN agencies couldn't take their biometrics. We've heard many stories, and as someone who has origins from Ukraine, actually, and have been there to see those people coming from Ukraine to host countries like Moldova, many of them did not want to register, the fact that they flew Ukraine, because maybe some of them were afraid to be persecuted. So many stories like that made me think that this is a very complicated topic, and it's a very complex, and there is no better way to understand what's happening than hearing it from people themselves who are living through this.
Absolutely. Wow. How does technology, Mariana, in your view, play a role in addressing the issue of identification, which, as you say, is very complex? How does it help address the complexities and the concerns, especially for those who lack it, to give a voice for the voiceless in the right ways?
Right. Well, the right way is a keyword here. So listen, I think we can all agree that technology is neutral. It's really how we are going to use it. So per se, it is a tool. It's simply a tool, right? So what we are going to make out of it is what matters. And there have been really good uses of technology. And as someone who has spent a decade at the World Bank in this field, and even before that in the tech sector, I am a huge advocate for technology for good, and have been on the forefront of many innovations in the world, connecting Africa to broadband, or spreading identification, digital identification in the world through the World Bank again. But now seeing how some governments are using it to oppress their citizens, sometimes, to dictate policies that are undefensible, using technology to monitor them, to surveil them, really raises the question of ethical use of technology. And are we there yet? Do we have this collective consciousness about what are the risks on the ground? Because, again, sitting at the World Bank in Washington, D.C. or New York, at the UN, or even here in Davos, it's easy to imagine how technology can be used for good. But then going on the ground and seeing how it is used to actually oppress people, to control them in countries who have authoritarian regimes, is really scary. So I think maybe the primary audience of this documentary are actually people at the World Bank, at the UN, in these organizations that make these policy decisions. And if you are these people working for these organizations, please raise awareness among your colleagues that we need more voices coming from the ground to inform us on the impact of these policies.
Right. Now, we only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to keep my next questions rather fast. But what can individuals, precisely as you say, individuals and organizations do to support the cause of providing personal identification to those who lack it?
Just like I said, raise awareness and talk around you. Even if here we again are in a very special circle of people. But for example, reaching out outside of your usual circles. Like, for example, with this movie I did, I reached out to an unusual suspect. That's Hollywood for me. Someone I would never go to talk to. So I had this idea of reaching out to Brad Kremer. He's here. He's a co-director with me of the movie. Please come, Brad. He was very new to this world. And I just want you to hear from him. Why did he decide to take on such an endeavor?
Brad,
Thank you.
As someone outside the world of tech, welcome, and thanks so much for all your work getting this documentary and making it happen. And the message you say for the world is so impactful. As someone outside of the world of tech for impact or digital identity, what inspired you to jump outside of your comfort zone and work with Mariana on this documentary?
Well, it really was Mariana's story and her passion. When we first met, she told me, about, the background of her life's passion, basically. Her story of not having an identity growing up, and then what she did at the World Bank, and just what she's dedicated her life to. And then the more I learned about the billion people without identity and what that can cause, and the fact that it's not just refugees from third world countries, that it's like everyday people all over the world. And so when I heard this story, I just had to be a part of it, and so I brought in, my colleagues, Jim and Roxy, and we all went on an adventure and met some amazing people, some inspiring stories, some sad stories, and we just feel that it's a story that needs to be told. People need to know about this.
Yeah. So,
So
question. Yeah.
last question. Unfortunately, we don't have much more time. So what is next moving forward? Is there anything on the horizon that we should look out for?
I think it all makes sense. If you look at it, what we're trying to say with Brad is that this is something that touches everyone, not just them, the refugees, in these faraway countries. It happens everywhere. It happens in the United States. It happens here in Switzerland, everywhere. People who have no way of proving who they are and therefore denied of access to so many benefits and services. And we need to have more conversations about that. A movie like this, a documentary like this, should be seen by kids in school. Simply, they should not be repeating the errors that we still do with border walls and policies that are harming everyone, and especially the most vulnerable. So we thought at the WIN Foundation that we could invite more collaboration and create a specific entity that looks at aspects of identification and how this should be done properly, how they could be implemented properly. So we have just recently launched the Universal Identity Council. So it's a nonprofit that will work with governments, with organizations, with individuals, nonprofits, to really raise awareness and advise governments on better policies and better ways of implementing them. So if you are interested, please reach out to me. I am the chair of the council. We also have a website, uidc.org. And I'll be happy to discuss with you collaboration. I'm here this entire afternoon. So thanks for listening, and please watch the movie.
Thank you so much, Mariana, for joining us. Again, reminder to the audience, check out shadowsinthedark.movie, and we can't wait to see what you do next.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that fascinating talk.